The Resilience Across Borders podcast is intended for education, support, and inspiration. I am not a psychologist or a medical doctor and do not offer any professional, medical, or health advice. If you are dealing with or suffering from any psychological or medical conditions, please seek help from a qualified health professional. Hello and welcome back to Resilience Across Borders podcast. I'm your host, Rachid Zahidi, and also author of the Gym Journal. Today, we will talk about mental flexibility, the concept of how to pivot without losing focus. So in a world defined by rapid change, uncertainty, and constant information flow, one trait is quietly outperforming intelligence, talent, and even discipline, and that is mental flexibility. What is that? It's the ability to adapt your thinking without abandoning your direction. So, in order to pivot, we need it without losing your core focus. So, unlike being rigid or rigidity, which resists change, or on the other side, impulsiveness, which chases every new idea, mental flexibility is a calibrated skill, grounded yet adaptive. So, from a neuroscience perspective, this is tied to cognitive flexibility, a function of the prefrontal cortex, for those of you that really like to go that deep, and that allows you to switch perspectives, update beliefs, and respond effectively to new information. So in practice, or in practical terms, it's what allows you to change your approach without changing your purpose. So why does mental flexibility matter? Anyways, there are a few reasons. The speed of change makes fixed plans obsolete quickly. Opportunities often appear disguised as disruptions. And emotional rigidity leads to stress, it leads to burnout and poor decisions. Mental flexibility doesn't mean being indecisive, it means being strategically adaptive. So, the number one thing to keep in mind is anchor to purpose, not to plans. Rigid people cling to how things should happen. Flexible people stay committed to why, and then they can adjust the how. When your identity is tied to a specific plan, any disruption feels like failure. When it's tied to purpose, disruption becomes redirection. So, example, let's say a career pivot. You plan to grow a specific business model, but the market shifts or the market changes. Instead of forcing it, you ask, what is my core mission here? Then you pivot the model while still preserving the mission. Say, okay, another example, like a content, for those of you who write content, like a content strategy shift. Your long-term or your long-form blog content isn't gaining traction, right? So instead of quitting, you pivot to short-form video or other type while keeping the same message. So one thing to keep in mind. Number two is separate identity from strategy. One of the biggest blockers to flexibility is ego attachment. If your default becomes, I am someone who does this or does it this way, you'll resist better alternatives even when they're obvious and right under your nose, because you've woven that into your identity. This is how I do it, and I do it this way. An example is like business leadership. A founder insists on a method that worked years ago, and then growth stalls. And so you stay with that approach, nothing happens, or you may slide backwards, or may lead to failure completely. But a flexible approach would be thinking like, okay, this worked before. That doesn't mean it's still the best approach. That doesn't mean it's optimal now. So You can also apply it to personal growth. You've always seen yourself as okay, if you've said to yourself and you saw yourself always as bad at relationships, mental flexibility allows you to rewrite that identity through new behaviors. The number three to keep in mind is use this idea of this or something better kind of thinking, because mental rigidity often comes from narrowing outcomes too early. Flexibility expands possibility without losing intention. Difference here. Okay, one of the common things is obviously everybody talks about goal setting and all of that. So an example is goal adjustment. You aim for a specific, say, income number through one channel, right? The channel underperforms. Instead of panic, when you're thinking in this mindset of this or something better, opens alternative paths. Like you may think, okay, can I do this through partnerships? Can I do this through other offers? Can I do this through a package or pricing changes? But again, your aim is still there, but the channels can shift and the way you approach it can shift. Another good example is relationships. You fixate on one specific outcome with one person. Flexibility allows you to stay open to better aligned connections. So you're no longer just narrow-minded or narrow-focused. You're keeping in mind the big idea, the big goal that you want to, an outcome that you want to achieve, but you open up your possibilities about a couple of, or what is the best way to do it. If you try one thing and then there seems to be a better way to do it, then obviously that leaves you open and ready to do the better way. Number four is train cognitive reframing in real time. As with most things, it requires training and practice. So flexibility is not just strategic, it's emotional. Your ability to reinterpret situations quickly determines whether you freeze or adapt. This is grounded in principles from CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, where our thoughts, not events, drive emotional responses. In other words, it's not like the event, it's how we think about it and how we approach it and how we interpret it. Then that kind of drives the emotion, which the emotion drives the response and the behavior. So again, because we like to give examples and talk about practical uses, so you're thinking, okay, there's a setback, take it as feedback, right? Say, okay, I failed launch, then becomes data on what didn't work instead of proof that you failed. So if instead of thinking to yourself, oh, I failed, you look at it as, okay, look at this data. It shows what didn't work. So how can I use this data and optimize for success? Another way to think about it is, okay, look at rejection as redirection. Instead of internalizing it and internalizing rejection, you think to yourself, okay, this is guiding me toward a better solution or a better fit. Number five, build decision agility. In other words, not overthinking masquerades as productivity sometimes, but it's often rigidity in disguise. Flexible thinkers decide, test, adjust, and repeat instead of staying frozen in indecision and overthinking and paralysis by analysis. So, an example of that is fast iteration. Instead of planning endlessly and never launching, you launch a minimum version and then you refine as you go. Or another way to look at it is from a time perspective and time boxed decisions. In other words, give yourself a deadline. I will decide within 24 hours with the best available data. Instead of dragging it out and then using it as a way to procrastinate and then maybe miss on an opportunity or never decide. Yeah, just sometimes just being forced to give yourself that deadline gets you to act, gets you to make that decision and move forward instead of staying stuck indefinitely. Number six, regulate your nervous system first. This is one thing we overlook a lot of times. We think everything happens in the head, but also there is a lot of other things that lead to that, because if we're not regulated, we're not thinking clearly. If our feelings and emotions are dysregulated, we're all over the place, and we are not centered, the decision making is going to be flawed, if not completely out the door. So here's the overlooked truth. You cannot be mentally flexible if you are emotionally overwhelmed or emotionally flooded. Stress narrows perception. Calm expands it. So flexibility requires access to a regulated nervous system, often supported by somatic practices and breath work. And basically what that means is somatic, if you're not familiar with it, is working with your body, dropping into your body instead of just being stuck in your head and spinning. Because a lot of the feelings and emotions, they work through the body. So you have to learn how to process them and process them in a healthy way. So, say before a major decision, pause, breathe deeply, slow your body, and center, and then get into that calm, and then decide. Or during conflict, instead of reacting immediately, take 60 seconds to regulate before responding. The more time you can stop like that and reflect, you create space between stimulus and reaction. So you get to have a measured response instead of getting sucked into the hurricane. Number 7, run multiple scenario thinking. Again, this is not to just drag this out and start going left, up, down, whatever. 3 things. So rigid thinkers prepare for one future. Flexible thinkers prepare for several. But again, don't get lost in here. This doesn't create anxiety, it creates strategic confidence. Say business planning. You just think, okay, what is the best case scenario? What is the most likely and realistic and expected scenario or case? And what is the worst case, right? So now you're ready, not reactive. You're prepared. But then anything beyond that, you're just, again, using thinking as another excuse for procrastination. So another example is life transitions. If one direction or one path doesn't work, you already have alternatives mapped out. Of course, sometimes it's good to burn the ships. Let's say, okay, if you're starting a business and you want to make sure that you go all the way. Sometimes if you leave yourself too many options, you may back out or give up easily. So don't confuse those 2 things, right? So you still have to move forward. Obviously, like there's going to be adversity. The path may be difficult at times. There's going to be obstacles to overcome. Do not confuse that with just giving up quickly. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. But do the best case, do the expected case, and do the worst case, and move forward. Number 8, practice letting go faster. So flexibility is directly tied to your ability to release what no longer works. The longer you hold to outdated strategies, identities, or expectations, the more friction you create. Again, because of the previous point I mentioned, you will know when you've been holding on to something and you've tried everything and it just same result and it just doesn't go anywhere. When you have emptied the cache, you have emptied the tank, you have tried everything that's possible, and when it's time to change direction and let go. Let go is not easy for everybody, and that applies to many things. Okay, a great example of that of sunk costs, because you invested time and money into something. Believe me, I've been guilty of that. That isn't working. So you invested time, you invested money, and that thing isn't working. But you keep wanting to prove your original thinking right, and you say, I already put money in here. And then I think there is that saying there, don't put good money after bad money. Even if you lost money already in something and it's not working, don't keep putting more good money into that already lost money, just as an example. Because continuing doesn't justify the past, it just compounds the loss. It just keeps adding to it and it's wasting your time. So it's not allowing you to move on to doing something else. Another place is emotional detachment. Releasing the need for things to unfold a certain way creates space for better outcomes. It's a balancing act, right? It's balancing the balance between flexible thinking and focused direction. Mental flexibility is not chaos. It's not constantly changing direction. It's adjusting your approach while staying aligned with your destination. Think of it like navigation. Your destination stays fixed, Your route adapts based on conditions. You don't just stop there. If there is a detour, you don't give up. You go with the detour and you do what you need to do to get to the chosen destination. So mental flexibility is the bridge between resilience and growth. It allows you to stay grounded without becoming rigid. It allows you to adapt without losing yourself. It allows you to move forward even when the path changes. So, in a world where change is constant, the most powerful question becomes, am I holding on to this because it's right or because it's familiar? Big difference, right? Is it right? Or am I just holding on to it because it is familiar? So the moment you can answer that honestly, you unlock one of the most valuable skills of the modern, ever changing era. So, as always, thank you for tuning into the Resilience Across Borders podcast. If you're enjoying this podcast, finding it helpful to you, please follow, review, share, and you can follow obviously the blog. Its URL is at resilience.com. And importantly, remember to be kind to yourself and be kind to others and stay resilient.